The sun began to rise over the small town of Maplewood, casting a warm glow through the kitchen window. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, a comforting ritual that had become a part of her mornings. Sarah often found solace in these little moments, the light filtering through the curtains, the distant sound of cars on the road, the gentle hum of life continuing outside while she lingered in her thoughts. Lately, however, her thoughts had been clouded with a sense of monotony. She spent her days tidying up, changing the sheets, and making grocery lists that never seemed to get followed. Her husband, Mark, left early for work and returned late, leaving her caught between the routine of domesticity and an unshakable feeling of restlessness. But that Thursday, everything changed with a text message from Mark. "Mr. Anderson invited us to spend the weekend at his estate. He says we need a break." She read the message twice, the name weighing heavily on her mind. Mr. Anderson was more than just Mark's boss, he was a figure of authority, a lighthouse guiding the ambitions of her husband and his colleagues through the turbulent waters of corporate life. Sarah had only met him once at a company Christmas party, recalling his firm handshake, the deep lines etched into his forehead, and the way he spoke softly, compelling others to lean in closer. He didn't need to raise his voice, the world around him seemed to quiet instead. "Do you think it's a good idea?" she asked when Mark arrived home, his tie slightly askew and a hopeful smile on his face. "Of course. He doesn't invite just anyone. It's a chance for us to connect and unwind." "You'll love the house," he replied enthusiastically. Sarah paused, feeling the weight of the word chance settle between them, light yet heavy at the same time. It wasn't the first time she had heard it. Sometimes it felt as if Mark navigated an invisible chessboard, where every move mattered, while she merely picked up the fallen pieces. They accepted the invitation. On Saturday morning, as they drove away from the city, the landscape transformed. The road narrowed, flanked by sprawling vineyards that stretched endlessly, a lush green blanket. Finally, they arrived at the estate, its white iron gate standing tall and pristine, almost intimidating in its perfection. A gardener meticulously arranged rose bushes, each one standing at attention. The air was fragrant with damp earth and something expensive. Mr. Anderson awaited them at the top of the steps, his linen shirt unbuttoned at the collar, a heavy watch gleaming on his wrist. He smiled, a small, efficient gesture that didn't waste energy. "Welcome," Mark said, his voice bright. "Finally convinced you to take a break." "Thank you for the invitation, sir," Mark replied, his tone almost childlike with excitement. Mr. Anderson's gaze shifted to Sarah, lingering for a moment as if assessing her hair, shoulders, hands, dress. She felt her skin prickling with awareness, as if her clothes had shrunk a size. She extended her hand, and he took it with a measured firmness, making her feel as though this was how the world was greeted when one had never feared it would fail them. "Sarah, right?" he asked, keeping her name on his lips. "The house is much more beautiful with lovely people inside." She smiled reflexively, one of those automatic responses learned early on to avoid hurting anyone's feelings. A housekeeper appeared to take their luggage, and Mr. Anderson led them inside. The cool stone floor felt refreshing beneath her feet, the walls adorned with paintings she didn't recognize but clearly held significance due to their frames and the light that illuminated them. To the left was a sunlit room with floor-to-ceiling windows, curtains swaying gently as if breathing. To the right, a corridor hinted at bedrooms, secrets, and the quiet comfort of a fine hotel. "Mark, after lunch, I need your help confirming some numbers for the report," Mr. Anderson said as they ascended the staircase. "It's not work, I just want to ensure we're not caught off guard on Monday." "Of course, sir," Mark replied eagerly, like someone grasping a lifeline thrown from a boat. In the room designated for her, a small balcony overlooked the pool. The water shimmered, creating perfect ripples, and for a fleeting moment, she imagined herself there in the late afternoon, a book in her lap that she wouldn't read, legs stretched out, a cold, tangy drink in hand. She tucked that image away, trying to balance an old fear she couldn't quite name. They lunched on the terrace, served a white wine that seemed to have been opened just to match the sky. Mr. Anderson inquired about their neighborhood, her favorite cafes, and her mother's recipes. Simple questions, yet asked with such attention that it left her flustered. As she answered, it felt as if he could see beyond her words, as if her tone held a narrative of its own. "Sarah cooks wonderfully," Mark interjected proudly. "Her creamy cod dish? Unmatched." "I believe it," Mr. Anderson said, raising his glass toward her. "There are techniques that school doesn't teach." The words lingered, neutral yet touching on something she couldn't quite define. She lowered her gaze to her plate, feeling the sun warm her neck while an unexpected chill ran down her spine. After coffee, Mr. Anderson placed a hand on Mark's shoulder, a small gesture, yet it sparked a light in Mark's eyes. "Let's head inside to review those numbers. It'll be quick." He turned to Sarah. "Anna can show you around if you'd like, or you can head to the pool. It's too beautiful a day to waste." She nodded, and for a moment, the two men disappeared into the house, their voices fading into a distant hum. Alone with the light and the water, Anna, the housekeeper, gestured for her to follow and asked if she needed a swimsuit. "Yes, please," Sarah replied, grateful. She chose a simple, dark blue one-piece. As she stood before the mirror, she noticed the curve of her shoulders, the paleness of her skin from winter, and how the fabric hugged her waist. It wasn't vanity, it was recognition, like finding an old photograph and remembering someone she had always been. Stepping onto the balcony, the warmth of the sun greeted her gently. She descended the stairs slowly, conscious of each step as if the ground might remember her. She settled onto a lounge chair, a towel still smelling of sunshine draped over her. Closing her eyes, she listened to the distant sound of a door opening, a short laugh, the wheels of a tea cart gliding over marble, and then the summer silence that filled her ears without noise. Time slipped away. When she opened her eyes, she caught a glimpse of a shadow reflected in the glass door. Mr. Anderson approached, carrying 2 bottles of water and a more relaxed smile than before. "Work hasn't consumed me," he said, placing the bottles on the low table. "May I sit?" "Of course," she replied, adjusting the strap of her swimsuit without thinking. He settled into the lounge chair beside her, crossing his legs, his gaze drifting over the pool as if searching for answers hidden beneath the surface. "The view here is better than I remembered," he remarked. For a moment, she wasn't sure if he meant the garden or her. She chose silence. Some words, once spoken, could amplify things better left unsaid. The sun dipped slightly, softening the blue of the sky. The water rippled with an unseen breeze. She felt his gaze linger, then shift away, only to return, calculated and precise, like someone choosing where to place a finger on a page. "Mark speaks very highly of you," he finally said. "I'm proud of him," she smiled, a brief, warm flicker. Yet, there was a pang, as if the word proud were borrowed clothing, fitting, but not truly hers. "He's been very dedicated," she continued, returning his kindness. "Sometimes, perhaps too much." Mr. Anderson leaned forward, picked up a bottle, and opened it with a soft pop, extending it toward her. Their fingers brushed for a fleeting moment, and in that instant, a world of awareness passed between them. She took a sip to occupy herself, realizing her heart raced a bit faster than necessary. "Rest is good," he said, as if answering a thought she hadn't voiced. "And beauty, too." She found herself unsure of where to look. The glass of water suddenly fogged, and she felt her name written invisibly there, sitting beside her husband's boss in a house that wasn't hers. The afternoon had taken a small step inside her, almost abstract yet enough to make her understand that something would shift that weekend. She didn't know what. Just that when a door opens, the air changes, and without her realizing it, that door had already begun to creak ajar. Sunday dawned with light filtering through the linen curtains, as if painted by hand. The village seemed to breathe a different air than the city, no honking horns, no rush, just the distant sound of a rooster and the rhythmic splash of the pool water against the tiled walls. She slipped into a light, white dress that required no jewelry or makeup, the fabric clinging to her still damp shoulders. As she descended the stairs, she found Mr. Anderson already on the porch, a newspaper spread open and glasses perched halfway down his nose. His gesture was small, but when he saw her, he lowered the page and let his gaze linger. It wasn't a careless glance that stumbled and apologized, it was calculated, filled with pause, as if he were evaluating a piece of art, searching for the hidden lines. "Good morning," he said, his voice smooth and inviting. "Caroline," he said, and her skin seemed to respond to the name before her ears did. "Is Hugo still asleep?" She nodded, having woken first, tired of tossing in bed without sleep. Mr. Anderson gestured for her to sit. The sun barely touched the table, but there was already hot coffee, fresh bread, and perfectly sliced fruit laid out before her. "You should enjoy these days," he continued. "Rest does wonders." She attempted a smile, but his voice carried a weight that made her tense. Crossing her legs, she adjusted her dress, only then realizing the fabric had ridden up slightly above her knee. His gaze lingered there for a moment too long before he returned to his newspaper. Moments later, Hugo appeared, his hair tousled, a cheerful expression on his face. He sat beside her and began discussing company accounts and the reports Mr. Anderson had requested. The boss listened patiently, but occasionally his eyes drifted toward her, as if he were listening to background music but preferred the melody coming from another source. Breakfast concluded with promises of quick work ahead. Eager to please, Hugo followed Mr. Anderson to the office, leaving Caroline alone on the terrace. She took a deep breath, trying to convince herself that the sensation she felt was merely her imagination, but the skin on her arms remained prickled. Later, when they gathered for lunch, the tension returned. The table was set under a pergola draped with pink bougainvillea. The white wine sparkled in the glasses as if distilled from the sun itself. Mr. Anderson pulled out a chair for her, a simple, courteous gesture, but when he pushed it back, his hands brushed lightly against her bare back. The touch was brief but enough to send a shiver down her spine. "I hope the food is to your liking," he said, serving her first. "It's wonderful," she replied, trying not to meet his gaze directly. As he discussed business with Hugo, Mr. Anderson allowed his eyes to wander down to the neckline of her dress, then back to the movement of her lips as she took a sip of wine. She pretended not to notice, but every gesture felt heavier than it should have, lifting her fork, tucking her hair behind her ear, even laughing at something Hugo said. Everything felt observed, recorded. The lunch was not merely a meal, it was a silent game. Mr. Anderson spoke of reports, but the subtext lingered in every pause, in every lingering look. Hugo, blissfully unaware, believed he was impressing his boss with numbers and efficiency. Caroline, on the other hand, began to feel trapped in a web she didn't know how to escape. When the wine ran out, Mr. Anderson leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and said, "This afternoon, Caroline, you should see the garden. It's one of my prides. The roses are in full bloom. Hugo, if you don't mind, we need to go over a few details of the report." Her heart raced silently as she realized this was more than just an invitation to see flowers. A part of her was curious about how far this invisible line would stretch. The afternoon heat settled over the village like a heavy blanket. The cicadas sang hidden among the leaves, and the air smelled of warm earth mixed with the scent of roses. Mr. Anderson guided her along the stone path slowly, as if each step was rehearsed. He wore a light shirt, slightly open, moving with the confidence of someone who knew every corner, not just of the house, but of the people who entered it. "This garden was started by my wife," he said, pointing to an arch covered in red roses. "After her passing, I promised to keep it alive. It's the only place where I still talk to her." His words carried an unexpected weight. She looked at his face, stern yet shadowed with melancholy. Respect and compassion stirred within her, but she also sensed a trick. Speaking of lost love was a way to gauge the heart of the listener. "It's beautiful," she murmured. He tilted his head, but his eyes were not on the flowers, they were on her. "Beautiful is knowing how to recognize what we have in front of us," he replied. She continued walking, trying to maintain her composure. The white dress clung to her skin with the discreet sweat of the afternoon, and the sound of her sandals on the ground seemed louder than it should have. At every corner, he pointed out a tree, a statue, a fountain, but there was always that underlying silence, as if the words were mere veils covering another intention. They arrived at a small pergola draped in vines. The shade there was cool, almost a relief. Mr. Anderson pulled out a chair for her. As she sat down, the fabric of her dress rode up slightly, exposing a few more inches of her leg. He noticed, she was sure, because his gaze lingered before returning to her face. "Hugo is dedicated," he said, pouring her a glass of water. "He works a lot, perhaps too much." "Yes, sometimes I miss him at home," she confessed without thinking. Mr. Anderson set the glass down slowly, leaning slightly forward. "Dedication always comes at a price. He thinks he's working for your future, but sometimes he forgets the present." His words entered her like a dangerous whisper. It was true. How many nights had she spent alone, listening to the sound of the keyboard from the next room? How many dinners had been eaten in silence because he was exhausted? "I don't judge him," she replied defensively. "He does what he thinks is best." Mr. Anderson smiled slightly, not a smile of persuasion but one of knowing that the seed had already been planted. He stood and walked to a rose bush, cutting a red flower with pruning shears. He brought it to her, holding it out but not releasing it immediately. The thorn of the stem brushed lightly against her skin, almost without pain, just a shiver. "Be careful," he said. "Beauty can also hurt." She took the rose, her heart racing. The gesture was innocent, perhaps, but his gaze transformed everything. She felt trapped in a game where she didn't know the rules, but she sensed that the first misstep would be hers. "Do you like roses?" he asked. "I do, I've always liked them." Her voice came out softer than she intended. "Good," he leaned against the railing of the pergola, arms crossed. "Because I like women who know what they want." She looked down at the ground, at the stem of the flower between her fingers. He was pushing her into dangerous territory, and the strangest part was realizing that a part of her wanted to see how far it would go. Silence stretched between them. The song of a bird filled the air. Mr. Anderson moved closer, and this time the distance between them was short. His scent, mixed with the smell of the earth, clouded her head. "Caroline," he said her name slowly, as if savoring each syllable. "Do you know what the biggest mistake people make is?" She lifted her eyes. "What?" "To pretend they don't desire what they truly desire." The words hung in the air. Her heart raced so loudly she felt he could hear it. Before she could respond, they heard footsteps on the gravel. It was Hugo, running up, a bundle of papers in hand, beaming with pride. "Did I solve the numbers, sir?" he asked, breathless. Mr. Anderson straightened up, his serious demeanor returning as if nothing had happened. His impeccable boss mask was back in place. Very good, Hugo. We'll discuss that later. Now your wife has seen the garden. She looked at her husband, who smiled at her, pleased to see her there as if it were just a pleasant visit. He had no idea of the weight each moment of that walk had carried for her. She tightened her grip on the rose. The thorn pricked her lightly, but she didn't let go. It was as if she needed that small pain to keep herself grounded in the whirlwind that was beginning to stir within her. The afternoon heat poured onto the terrace like an unwelcome guest. The table was set with fine china, impeccably folded linen napkins, and a bottle of white wine sweating with cold droplets. She sat in the place Mr. Anderson indicated, right beside him. Hugo, ever eager, settled across from them, ready to discuss numbers and reports as soon as the opportunity arose. Mr. Anderson pulled her chair out with the same delicacy of a courteous gesture, but when he pushed it back, she felt his hand brush against her bare back, just below her pinned-up hair. It was a brief touch, almost imperceptible, but enough to send a shiver through her. I hope you're hungry, Caroline, he said, his voice low, almost intimate, as if it were meant just for her. The dish was served, grilled fish with fresh herbs. The aroma wafted up, but she could barely taste the food. Every time she lifted her fork, she felt his gaze following her, measuring the movement of her mouth, the pause of her fingers. It's delicious, she ventured to say, trying to break the silence. The wine enhances it, he replied, reaching for the bottle, leaning in to refill her glass. In that slow gesture, the sleeve of his shirt brushed against her arm. It wasn't an accident, it was deliberate. His scent mingled with the aroma of the wine, and she felt as if even the air was holding her captive. Hugo, oblivious, continued. Sir, I analyzed those numbers you asked for. I think we found a solution for the branch's deficit. Very good, Hugo. Mr. Anderson didn't take his eyes off her. He took a sip, then wiped his lips with the napkin. But sometimes the numbers hide what is right in front of us. She looked down at her plate, trying to escape the insinuation. The silence stretched heavy, and to mask it, she lifted her glass to her lips. She felt his eyes on her. Caroline sat at the table, the sun filtering through the large windows of the elegant dining room, casting soft shadows on the polished wood. The atmosphere was charged, a subtle tension hanging in the air as Mr. Anderson, her husband's boss, spoke slowly, each pause feeling like a deliberate trap. He reached across the table to pass the salt, his fingers brushing against her arm, lingering just a moment longer than necessary. When he brought over a platter of roasted vegetables, his hand rested firmly over hers, a calm assurance that felt electrifying. The sunlight danced across the tablecloth, illuminating her bare legs, and she could feel Mr. Anderson's gaze on her, making her feel exposed, as if her dress was merely a thin veil. Do you enjoy roses, Caroline? He asked suddenly, his voice smooth and inviting. Yes, I do, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They're beautiful but require care. His eyes dropped to her hands, and she sensed he was not just talking about flowers. Hugo, her husband, oblivious to the undercurrents, smiled proudly as he explained the financial reports he had prepared. Caroline felt torn between her husband's innocence and the overwhelming presence of a man who knew exactly the effect he had on her. As lunch came to a close, she reached for her napkin, and Mr. Anderson leaned in to assist, their fingers brushing together. The electric charge of that moment left her suspended between retreating and the inexplicable desire to stay. The food was excellent, he said, raising his glass in a discreet toast, his eyes fixed on her. But the best part is the company. She smiled awkwardly, swallowing hard. Hugo raised his glass too, pleased at what he thought was a compliment directed at him. In that moment, Caroline realized the game was not merely about glances or gestures, it was about power. Mr. Anderson didn't need to raise his voice or force anything. His mere presence beside her was enough, a patient predator waiting for the right moment to strike. When the table was finally cleared, she felt as if she hadn't truly eaten. The lingering taste was not of the fish or wine but of a growing tension that burned within her. Deep down, against her will, she began to wonder how far he was willing to go, and how far she could resist. The afternoon sun blazed down on the villa, making the blue tiles of the pool shimmer like liquid glass. After lunch, Mr. Anderson suggested, with the casual authority of someone who commanded attention, "Hugo, we need to review some contracts in the office. Caroline should take the opportunity to cool off in the pool. It would be a shame to stay cooped up inside." Her husband, eager to be of help, nodded enthusiastically. Caroline hesitated for a moment, but there was no room for refusal. She smiled politely and headed upstairs. In the guest room, she found a dark blue one-piece swimsuit, elegant and fitted. As she slipped it on, she noticed how the fabric hugged her curves perfectly. The mirror reflected a version of herself she barely recognized: bare shoulders, fair skin glowing in the light, a defined waist, and strong hips. She pressed her lips together, not out of vanity, but awareness. Slowly, she descended the stairs, wrapped in a towel. The warm air hit her face as she pushed open the glass door to the terrace. The pool awaited her, calm and inviting, a perfect mirror. She let the towel slip from her arms, feeling the breeze caress her exposed skin. The silence was broken only by the sound of water as she dove in. The coolness enveloped her like an unexpected embrace. She floated there, eyes closed, hair drifting around her, feeling as if the world had shrunk to just that vast blue. "Looks like the pool hasn't lost its charm," a deep voice cut through the air. She opened her eyes to see Mr. Anderson standing by the lounge chair, his linen shirt open, sunglasses reflecting the sunlight. He held a glass filled with ice. "I hope you don't mind some company," he said, setting the glass down and removing his shades. "Not at all," she murmured, moving further into the water. He approached the edge, crouching down to test the temperature with his hand. His simple gesture made her acutely aware of the strength in his arms, still evident despite his age. "The water is perfect," he remarked, "but what makes it truly interesting is who enters it." His words hung heavily in the air, and she felt her cheeks flush, despite the coolness of the pool. Trying to mask her discomfort, she submerged herself, surfacing with water cascading down her neck and shoulders. The fabric of her swimsuit clung to her, outlining her figure. Mr. Anderson watched in silence, his gaze penetrating. No words were needed, his look spoke volumes. When she stepped out of the water to grab her towel, she felt his eyes trace her from head to toe, lingering on the droplets sliding down her legs, the curve of her hips, the arch of her back. "Allow me," he said, lifting the towel and extending it toward her. She took it, but his fingers lingered on hers for a moment longer than necessary. They were caught in a brief instant where the touch conveyed more than words could express. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He smiled, a slow, victorious grin, and settled into the lounge chair next to hers, pouring more ice into his glass. The sound of ice clinking filled the silence. "You know, Caroline," he began, gazing out at the horizon, "most people are afraid to show who they really are. They dress in conventions, hide behind roles, but the body never lies." The statement felt like a challenge. She tightened the towel against her chest, realizing there was no fabric that could conceal how he saw her. "I don't know what you mean," she ventured cautiously. "Yes, you do," he replied, his voice calm and unhurried. "Just look into your eyes." She turned her face away, but he was right. There was an unease within her that she couldn't disguise. The silence stretched on, the sun dipping lower, casting golden reflections across the water. Her heart raced, not from the heat, but from the awareness of being under the gaze of a man who commanded spaces, people, even silences. At that moment, the office door swung open. Hugo appeared, a stack of papers in hand. "Honey, are you enjoying the pool?" he asked cheerfully, unaware of the tension in the air. "Yes, it's lovely," she replied, trying to sound casual. Mr. Anderson stood up slowly. "Work calls, but don't waste the sun, Caroline." His last words, spoken almost in secret, echoed in her mind long after he had re-entered the house. Left alone, seated on the lounge chair, her body still damp, the towel clinging to her skin, she gripped it tightly, as if to erase the sensation he had left behind. But it was futile. The touch, the look, the certainty of being closely observed, it all lingered within her like the salt that clings to skin after a swim in the ocean. She realized, with a knot in her throat, that the game had not ended, it had merely begun. Dinner unfolded under the dim light of tall candelabras. The long table felt too spacious for just 3 people. Red wine flowed freely, each glass filled more than the last, Hugo's laughter growing louder, while Mr. Anderson's pauses grew heavier. Caroline ate slowly, acutely aware that every movement, from how she lifted her fork to how she dabbed her lips with the napkin, was being scrutinized. Hugo, animated, raised toasts every 15 minutes. Mr. Anderson, patient, encouraged him with brief affirmations. "Very good, Hugo." Caroline observed the scene as if detached from her own body, watching her husband drown in alcohol to please, while her boss sipped just enough to maintain control. As the clock neared midnight, Hugo could barely hold himself up. Mr. Anderson stood, assisting him to the guest room. Caroline followed closely, supporting her husband's arm. As he lay down, she noted how completely he had surrendered, his breathing heavy, tie loosened, a childlike smile plastered on his sleeping face. "He'll sleep like a rock," Mr. Anderson commented, adjusting the blanket with calculated calm. "He worked too hard." She felt a chill run through her. It was just the two of them now, standing mere steps from an unconscious man. She waved goodbye and retreated to her room, closing the door quietly behind her. The solitude weighed heavily. She opened the window. The garden was shrouded in darkness, only the moon illuminating the rose bushes. She changed into a short, fine silk nightgown she had found among the leftover clothes in the closet. She didn't want to seem vain, but the lightness of the fabric felt more comfortable in the warmth of the night. Lying down, sleep eluded her. She heard footsteps in the hallway. Her heart raced for no apparent reason. Then came 2 soft knocks at the door. "Caroline," his deep voice called, restrained. She rose slowly, hesitating. What could he want at this hour? She opened the door just a crack. Mr. Anderson stood there, shirt open, no tie, his face partially in shadow. "Sorry to disturb you," he said quietly, looking directly at her. "I wanted to check if you're comfortable." "I am, thank you," she replied, her voice trembling. He leaned against the doorframe, close enough for her to catch the scent of his cologne mixed with the polished wood. "It's important to me that you feel at home here," he added, his tone layered with meaning. The silence that followed was thick. Caroline found herself caught between the impulse to close the door and the strange magnetism of staying. Subscribe to the channel,